If you'd told me that my family would one day use my name for a loan without telling me, I would have said you were crazy. My name is Clara, and we weren't perfect, but I always believed we had trust. I grew up in a house where family meant everything. We celebrated every birthday together, shared Sunday dinners, and promised we'd always have each other's backs. But sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you in ways you never expect. I was the youngest of three. My older brother, Airman, was the golden child, the one who got straight A's, the one who never broke curfew. My sister, Layla, was the peacemaker, always patching up arguments between me and Airman or between our parents when money got tight. I was the dreamer, the one who wanted to travel, to start a business, to do something different. My parents loved us all, but they were old school. They believed in sacrifice, in putting family first, even if it meant putting yourself last. When I graduated from college, I was the first in my family to do so. My parents were proud, but also nervous. "Don't forget where you came from," my dad would say. "Family is everything." I promised I wouldn't. I got a job in the city, rented a small apartment, and started paying off my student loans. I called home every week, visited when I could, and sent money whenever my parents asked. It wasn't easy, but I did it because I loved them. Things started to change when Airman lost his job. He'd been working at a startup that went under, and suddenly he was back at home, sleeping in his old room and arguing with my dad about who should pay the bills. Layla was going through a divorce, struggling to raise her two kids on her own. My parents were stressed, and the house felt heavier every time I visited. One day, I got a call from my mom. She sounded tired, older than I remembered. "We need some help," she said, "just until things get better." I sent what I could, even though it meant skipping dinner some nights. I didn't mind. I thought that's what family did. But then the calls started coming more often. "The car broke down. The roof is leaking. Airman needs money for an interview suit." I started to feel like a bank, not a daughter. I tried to set boundaries, but every time I said no, my mom would cry or my dad would remind me of all they'd sacrificed. I felt guilty, but I also felt trapped. Then, one afternoon, I got a letter from the bank. It was addressed to me, but I didn't recognize the account number. I opened it, thinking it was a mistake. Inside was a statement for a loan, a big one. The balance was over $80,000. My heart started racing. I called the bank, thinking it was identity theft. The woman on the phone asked for my information, then put me on hold. When she came back, her voice was different. "Actually, you're listed as the primary on this loan. It was taken out 6 months ago. All the documents have your name and signature." I felt sick. I hadn't signed anything. I asked for copies of the documents. When they arrived, I recognized the handwriting. It was my mom's. She'd forged my signature. I couldn't believe it. I called her, shaking with anger and fear. She didn't deny it. She said we had no choice. The bank wouldn't give us the loan without a cosigner. "You're the only one with good credit. We were going to tell you, but we didn't want to worry you." I was speechless. I had heard stories about this happening to other people, but I never thought it would happen to me. I asked her how much they'd borrowed, what they'd used it for. She said it was to pay off Armin's debts, to fix the house, to help Layla with her legal fees. "It's all for family," she said, as if that made it okay. I hung up without saying goodbye. I spent the night pacing my apartment, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't afford to pay off an $80,000 loan. I couldn't believe my own family had done this to me. I felt betrayed, angry, and completely alone. The next day, I went to the bank in person. I brought the documents, explained the situation, and asked if there was any way to remove my name. The manager looked at me with sympathy, but shook his head. "I'm sorry," he said. "As far as the bank is concerned, you're the owner of this loan. You're responsible for the payments." I left the bank feeling numb, the weight of that $80,000 loan pressing down on my shoulders. I walked for hours, trying to make sense of it all. How could my own family do this to me? I'd always been the responsible one, the peacemaker, the one who picked up the pieces when things fell apart. But this was different. This wasn't just asking for help. This was stealing my future. I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. I kept thinking about all the times I'd said yes, all the times I'd put my family first. Had it all been a mistake? Had I been a fool for trusting them? I wanted to call my mom, to scream at her, to make her understand what she'd done. But every time I picked up the phone, I put it down again. What was the point? She'd already made her choice. I finally called Lila. She answered on the first ring, her voice tense. "I know why you're calling," she said. "Mom told me everything." I asked her how she could go along with it, how she could let them use my name without even asking. She was quiet for a long time. "I didn't want to," she said, "but I was desperate. I thought we'd find a way to fix it before you found out." I could hear the regret in her voice, but it didn't make it any easier. I told her I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't be the safety net, the backup plan, the one who always cleaned up everyone else's mess. She cried, but I didn't have any tears left. I knew I had to protect myself. I made an appointment with a lawyer, brought all the documents, and explained what had happened. He listened carefully, then shook his head. "This isn't uncommon, but it's hard to prove fraud when it's family. You can press charges, but it'll tear your family apart. Or you can try to renegotiate the loan, maybe get them to take responsibility." I left his office feeling even more lost. I didn't want to press charges against my own parents, but I also didn't want to spend the next decade paying for their mistakes. I decided to give them one last chance. I called a family meeting. No excuses, no delays. I told them to meet me at my apartment on Saturday. When they arrived, the tension was palpable. My mom looked ashamed, my dad wouldn't meet my eyes, and Armin just sat there, arms crossed, looking angry. I laid out the facts: the loan, the forged signature, the bank's refusal to remove my name. I told them I'd spoken to a lawyer, that I had options, but I didn't want to go down that road. "You have to fix this," I said. "I'm done being the one who pays for everyone else's mistakes. If you don't start making payments, I'll have no choice but to take legal action." My dad finally spoke. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice breaking. "We just didn't know what else to do." I looked at him, at all of them, and for the first time, I saw how desperate they were. But I also saw how little they'd thought about me, about what this would do to my life. I told them I loved them, but I had to put myself first now. They promised to start making payments. I set up a joint account so I could see every transaction. I made it clear that if they missed even one payment, I'd go to the police. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was the only way I could protect myself. The next few months were tense. My family made the payments, but barely. Every month, I had to remind them, to threaten them, to beg them to do the right thing. I hated what it was doing to us, but I didn't see any other way. During this time, I started to focus on my own life again. I threw myself into my work, took on new projects, and even started dating someone who made me feel seen and valued. I learned to set boundaries, say no without feeling guilty. I started going to therapy, talking through the pain and the anger, learning how to heal. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself. I made new friends, found joy in small things, and even started dreaming again. I realized that I didn't have to let my family's mistakes define me. I could choose my own future, even if that meant leaving them behind. But just when I thought things were starting to get better, I got another call from the bank. This time it wasn't about the loan. It was about the house my parents had used as collateral. They'd missed several payments, and the bank was ready to foreclose. But here's the twist. Because the loan was in my name, the bank now considered me the owner of the house. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The manager explained it all in a calm, professional voice, but my mind was racing.
As the primary on the loan, you're legally the owner of the property. If the payments aren't made, the house will go into foreclosure, but you have the right to take possession or sell it to cover the debt.
I hung up, stunned. I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, trying to process what this meant. The house I'd grown up in, the place where we'd celebrated every holiday, where I'd learned to ride a bike and had my first crush, it was mine now, at least on paper. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the final twist in a story that had gone so wrong. I knew I had to tell my family. I called my mom first. She answered on the second ring, her voice tense. "Is everything okay?" I told her what the bank had said, that if they didn't catch up on the payments, the house would be foreclosed, and that legally I was now the owner. There was silence on the other end. Then she started to cry. "We never meant for this to happen," she sobbed. "We just wanted to keep the family together. We thought we could fix it before you found out." I felt a mix of anger and pity. "You can't fix this by hiding it from me," I said. "You have to be honest. You have to take responsibility." I called my dad next. He was quiet, listened to everything, then said, "I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." But I could hear the defeat in his voice. I knew they didn't have the money. I knew they were out of options. I called Layla and Armin, told them what was happening. Layla was devastated. "I can't believe it's come to this," she said. Armin was angry, blaming everyone but himself. "This isn't fair," he snapped. "Why should you get the house? You didn't even want it." I didn't have the energy to argue. "It's not about what I want," I said. "It's about what's right. We have to face the consequences of our choices." The next few weeks were a nightmare. The bank sent letters warning of foreclosure. My parents tried to scrape together the money, but it wasn't enough. I met with lawyers, tried to find a way to save the house without ruining my credit or my future. Every night I lay awake, wondering how it had come to this. One day I got a call from the bank's real estate department. "If you want to keep the house, you can take over the payments and refinance in your name," the agent said. "Otherwise, we'll have to list it for sale." I had a choice to make. I could walk away, let the house go, and cut ties with my family for good. Or I could take over the house, make the payments, and try to turn this mess into something new. Days thinking it over. I walked through the old neighborhood, remembering the good times, the barbecues, the birthdays, the laughter that used to fill the rooms. I thought about all the pain, the betrayal, the lies. I thought about what it would mean to own the house, to be the one who saved it, even after everything that had happened. In the end, I decided to take over the house. I met with the bank, signed the papers, and officially became the owner. It wasn't easy. The payments were high, and I had to make sacrifices. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. I told my family what I'd done. My mom was relieved, my dad thanked me, and Layla cried. Armin was bitter, but even he couldn't deny that I'd saved them from losing everything. I made it clear that this wasn't a gift. It was a business decision. They could stay in the house, but they had to pay rent. If they couldn't, they'd have to move out. It wasn't the happy ending I'd once imagined, but it was real. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the owner. I set the rules. And for the first time, my family had to respect my boundaries. The transition was hard. My parents struggled with the idea of paying me rent. Armin was angry, accusing me of taking advantage of the situation. But I stood firm. I'd spent too long cleaning up their mistakes. It was time for them to take responsibility. Slowly, things started to change.
My family learned to live within their means. Layla found a better job, Armin started paying off his debts, and my parents learned to ask for help without expecting me to fix everything. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And as for me, I found peace in knowing that I'd done the right thing, even when it was hard. I learned to forgive, but I never forgot. I built a life on my own terms, and I never let anyone use my name with. The months that followed were a mix of relief and resentment. I had saved the house, but the cost was higher than anyone knew. I was paying a mortgage I never asked for, juggling my own bills, and trying to heal from the betrayal that still stung every time I walked through the front door. My parents were grateful, but the dynamics had shifted. I wasn't just the youngest anymore. I was the landlord, the one who held the keys, the one who could say no. My parents tried to go back to normal, but it wasn't possible. Every conversation about money was tense. Sometimes my mom would apologize, tears in her eyes, saying she never meant to hurt me. My dad would sit quietly, staring at the floor, as if he couldn't believe how far we'd fallen. Layla and Armin kept their distance, embarrassed and ashamed. Family dinners were quiet, filled with awkward silences and forced smiles.
I threw myself into work, determined to make the best of a bad situation. I started renovating the house, fixing things that had been broken for years. I painted the walls, replaced the old carpet, and planted flowers in the garden. It was therapeutic, a way to take back control, to make the house feel like mine. Slowly, it started to feel less like a burden and more like an opportunity. I also started to rebuild my relationships, not just with my family, but with myself. I went to therapy, talked through the anger and the hurt, and learned to set healthy boundaries. I made new friends, joined a book club, and even started dating again. I realized that I didn't have to let my family's mistakes define me. I could choose who I wanted to be, no matter what had happened in the past. As the house transformed, so did my family. My parents learned to respect my rules. They paid rent on time, helped with the upkeep, and stopped asking for handouts. Lila found a new apartment and started fresh with her kids. Armand moved out, got a steady job, and slowly began to rebuild his life. It wasn't perfect. There were still arguments, still old wounds that sometimes reopened, but we were trying, and that was enough. One day, I got a call from the bank manager who'd helped me through the transition. "I just wanted to let you know," he said, "you've done an incredible job. Most people would have walked away. You should be proud." I hung up, smiling for the first time in a long time. I realized that I wasn't just the owner of a house, I was the owner of my story. I started sharing my experience online, writing about what had happened and how I'd found the strength to move forward. To my surprise, people responded. I got messages from others who'd been through similar situations, people who'd been betrayed by family, who'd had to rebuild their lives from scratch. We shared advice, offered support, and celebrated each other's wins. The more I shared, the more I healed. I realized that I wasn't alone, that my story could help others find hope in the midst of chaos. I started speaking at local events, talking about financial literacy, boundaries, and the importance of self-respect. I met people who inspired me, who reminded me that it was possible to turn pain into purpose. My family slowly began to heal too. My mom and dad apologized again, this time with actions, not just words. They helped with the house, supported my projects, and even attended some of my talks. Lila and Armin thanked me for giving them a second chance, for not giving up on them even when they'd given up on themselves. I learned to forgive, but I never forgot. I knew that trust had to be earned, that love wasn't just about sacrifice, but about respect. I promised myself that I'd never let anyone, not even family, take advantage of me again. As the seasons changed, so did I. The house that had once been a symbol of betrayal became a place of healing, of new beginnings. I hosted dinners for friends, celebrated holidays with my family, and filled the rooms with laughter and love. I realized that I'd taken something broken and made it whole again. As time passed, the house became more than just a place to live.
It became a symbol of everything I'd overcome. I started hosting community events, inviting neighbors over for coffee, and even organizing a charity garage sale to raise money for local families in need. People who'd heard my story would stop by to share their own experiences, and I realized that what had once been a source of shame was now a source of strength. My family was changing too. My parents grew closer, learning to lean on each other instead of me. They found joy in small things: gardening, cooking together, taking walks in the evening. Lila's kids started calling the house Grandma's place, and even Armin, who had once been so angry, would drop by to help with repairs or just to talk. I found myself forgiving them, not because they deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger that had been holding me back. I learned that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing to move forward, to build something new out of the ruins of the past. I also started to dream again. I took a chance on a new job, one that let me travel and meet people from all over the world. I saved up for a trip to Europe, something I'd always wanted to do but never thought possible. I walked through ancient streets, ate foods I couldn't pronounce, and stood in museums staring at art that made me feel alive. Everywhere I went, I carried the lessons I'd learned at home. I knew how to set boundaries, how to say no, how to ask for help when I needed it. I knew that I was strong enough to survive anything, that I could build a life on my own terms. When I came back, I found the house waiting for me, a place that felt like mine in every way. I started writing about my experiences, sharing my story online and in local papers. The response was overwhelming. People reached out from all over, thanking me for being honest, for showing them that it was possible to heal, to forgive, to start over. My family was proud of me in a way they'd never been before. My mom would show off my articles to her friends, my dad would brag about my job, and even Armin and Lila would tell people about how I'd saved the house. It wasn't the kind of pride that came from perfection. It was the kind that came from survival, from facing the worst and coming out stronger. I started hosting holiday dinners again, filling the house with the smell of roasts and baked goods, with the sound of laughter and music. I invited friends who didn't have family nearby, neighbors who were alone, and anyone who needed a place to belong. The house became a haven, a place where people could be themselves, where they could find comfort and hope. One night, after everyone had gone home, I sat on the porch looking up at the stars. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the pain, the hard choices. I realized that I wouldn't change a thing. Every struggle had taught me something important, had shaped me into the person I was. I knew that life would never be perfect, that there would always be challenges, always be moments of doubt. But I also knew that I wasn't alone. I had built a family, a community, a home that was stronger than anything that had come before. As I closed my eyes, I made a promise to myself. I would keep moving forward, keep building, keep loving, no matter what. I would never let fear or anger hold me back again. I would live my life with courage, with kindness, and with the knowledge that I was enough. And if anyone ever tried to use my name without my permission again, I knew exactly what to do. I wasn't just a victim. I was the owner, the author of my own story. Spring arrived, and with it came a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in years. The house was bursting with color. Tulips and daffodils bloomed along the walkway, and the old maple tree in the front yard was full of new leaves. I spent my weekends in the garden, digging in the dirt, feeling the sun on my face, and thinking about how far I'd come. My family had changed too. We were still far from perfect, but there was a new honesty between us. My parents no longer hid their struggles or expected me to fix everything. Layla and Armin had learned to stand on their own feet, and our relationships were stronger for it. We talked openly about money, about boundaries, about the importance of trust. Sometimes we still argued, sometimes old wounds reopened, but we always found our way back to each other. I kept writing, sharing my story with anyone who needed to hear it. I spoke at schools, at community centers, even at a few banks that wanted to teach young people about financial literacy and the dangers of co-signing loans. I told them that it was okay to say no, that it was okay to put yourself first, even when it hurt. I told them that family should be built on love and respect, not on sacrifice and secrets. The house became a place of celebration. We hosted birthdays, anniversaries, and even a few weddings for friends who didn't have family of their own. I watched as the rooms filled with laughter, as the walls were covered with photos of new memories. I realized that I'd taken something that had once been a symbol of betrayal and turned it into a home, a place where anyone could belong. One day, I got a letter from the bank. It wasn't a bill or a warning. It was a thank you note from the manager who'd helped me through the hardest parts. "You've inspired us all," he wrote. "Your story reminds us that even when things seem impossible, there's always a way forward." I smiled, tears in my eyes, knowing that I'd made a difference, not just for myself, but for others too. My family was proud of me in a way they've never been before. My mom would introduce me to her friends as the one who saved our home. My dad would tell anyone who would listen about how I'd turned things around. Even Layla and Armin, who had once been embarrassed by my success, now celebrated it. We'd all learned that family wasn't about perfection, it was about forgiveness, about growth, about choosing each other again and again. As the years passed, I kept building, not just a home, but a life filled with purpose and joy. I traveled, met new people, and took on challenges I never would have dared before. I learned to trust myself, to believe in my own worth, and to never let anyone else define my value. I also learned to let go. I forgave my family not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I let go of the anger, the resentment, the need to be the hero. I realized that I didn't have to carry the weight of everyone else's mistakes. I could love them without losing myself. One evening, as the sun set over the garden, my mom sat beside me on the porch. She took my hand, her eyes filled with tears. She said, "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for hurting you, for taking advantage of your trust. I hope you can forgive me." I squeezed her hand, smiling through my own tears. I said, "I already have. We've all made mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them, that we choose to be better." My dad joined us, his voice soft. "We're proud of you, not just for saving the house, but for saving us. You taught us what it means to be family." As the stars came out, I realized that I'd found something even more important than a house or a happy ending. I'd found myself, strong, resilient, and unafraid to stand up for what I believe in. If you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, know that you're not alone. It's okay to set boundaries, to protect yourself, to choose your own happiness. It's okay to forgive, to heal, to build something beautiful out of the broken pieces. My family used my name for a loan. They didn't expect the bank to call me the owner, but in the end, I took control of my story, and I turned it into something stronger than anything they could have imagined. And that, I think, is the true meaning of family. Not just blood, but the choices we make, the love we give, and the courage to start again. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, remember, you're stronger than you think, and you can always rewrite your own story. If this story touched your heart or gave you hope, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another true story of resilience and revenge. And if you have a story of your own, share it in the comments below. I read every one, and you never know who you might inspire. Thank you for being part of this community. This is Clara, and I'll see you in the next story.